Hey folks, Mountain Eyes here. I got a request for some more original content, so tonight, have another true story on me. If you have an original creepypasta or true tale you want read, or a classic creepypasta or Reddit post you'd love to hear from me, then feel free to send in your requests using the email in the description below. Now, enjoy. Never take frogs from the coal miner's mountain. A true story written and narrated by Mountain Eyes of Mountain Eyes Narrations, and story originally posted under the name Phantasmal Poppy. Years ago, my papaw needed to make a little extra money to care for his family and expand his farm. So, he started looking for some extra work. With the tobacco plants moved to larger fields to grow taller, and hay not yet ready to be cut, papaw had a bit of extra time on his hands. It was during this time he took on a job driving trucks from the coal mines down the mountain to be loaded at the trains at the base. It was a decent job and good money, although some parts of it could be a bit worrisome. For starters, some of the roads were rather narrow, with nothing but high embankments on one side and steep cliffs on the other. With hardly any guardrails or natural terrain barriers, one wrong move could send a hapless truck and driver tumbling off the side of the mountain. Less immediate of a danger, but still prevalent in the minds of the truckers, were the mysterious occurrences that happened on that mountain. After all, any area with a coal mine is bound to have history. The thick, accented mountain folk were always good for a yarn, with most of their tales being as dark as the tunnels and shafts in which they toiled. Their jobs were fraught with dangers: cave-ins, tunneling into an aqueduct, exposure to gas. Many a man went below the surface, but not all would see the light of day again. This, of course, led to stories of the spirits of doomed miners roaming the mountainside. And those lonely spirits were, supposedly, always looking for others to join them. This, among many other tales, did not scare my papaw. He may be as Appalachian as they come, but he has never been overly superstitious. While some may be wary about stepping out onto certain parts of that mountain today, papaw was more than happy to explore a bit back then when it was light enough for him to do so. He was able to find quite a few interesting and useful things this way, including huge bullfrogs. Back then, papaw loved a gig for those big yellow-belly ones, which he claimed taste just like chicken. And since free food was good food, there were many times papaw had a tendency to scoop up some of these near little pools on the mountainside where they had been allowed to grow unperturbed. Papaw's little excursions ceased for a time, however, after one particular incident. One dark summer night, papaw was coming down the mountain with a load of coal, as usual. It was eerily quiet outside. A storm was steadily approaching. Of course, papaw was used to that sort of weather, and all the signs read that it might go around him. Still, he wanted to squeeze in a few more trips just in case. As papaw headed down the winding dirt path, he began looking around, noticing some of the long, wraith-like branches of the sparse trees and the thick tufts of grass that lined some of the embankments. Such places would have been perfect areas for a wildcat to hide. Or a vengeful ghost, papaw thought, smirking to himself. While some of his relatives had supposedly seen a few, papaw had not. After all, his closest brush with the paranormal was a turtle clattering around in an old wash tub in an old moonshiner's shack. Though, thinking back, that sounded like such a silly thing to be spooked by, just like the stories of the ghost miners. As that thought entered into his head, Papaw felt something heavy clap down onto his shoulder. The fact that he was almost at the base when this occurred was the only reason he did not jerk the truck over the side of the mountain. There was only enough room behind his seat to maybe squeeze an empty pop can, so it wasn't like a whole person could fit back there. At least, not a living one. Papaw managed to take a sharp curve without wrecking, and pulled the truck just short of the end of the road into a clearing. As this was a dirt road, it really had no shoulder to it. All the while, Papaw's hair was standing on end, and his mind was racing. He shouldn't have scoffed at the ghosts. One really did have a hold of him now. Maybe they were angry he'd taken frogs from the mountain? After all, he'd heard the stories of how some spirits remain territorial over the place where their earthly remains rested. Oh, he never should have taken that job. The moment the truck stopped, Papaw flung himself out of the cab to freedom. Or, so he thought. He hadn't realized that he had actually taken his accoster with him. For when he hit the ground, the weight on his shoulder lifted, falling in front of him. Why, it wasn't the hand of a ghost miner, but the biggest, fattest bullfrog he had ever seen. That's when Papaw remembered the frog he had caught that morning. He didn't have anything to put it in at the time, so he just tossed it into the truck, and had promptly forgotten all about it.